This is John Drabinski, and you're listening to the Black Studies Podcast, a series of conversations examining the history of the field. Our conversations engage with a wide range of activists and scholars, senior figures in the field, graduate students, and everyone in between, culture workers and political organizers, in order to explore the cultural and political meaning of Black studies as an area of inquiry and its critical methods. Today's conversation is with Theodore A. Harris, a Philadelphia-based artist and writer. Along with numerous exhibits of his multimedia artwork linked via his website, he is the author of The Center, Conscientious Objector to Formalism, and co-author of two books with Amiri Baraka, Our Flesh of Flames, and Malcolm X's Ideology, a book with Fred Moten, I Ran From It and Was Still In It, and Triptych, text by Amiri Baraka and Jack Hirschman. In this conversation, we discuss the history of Black expressive culture, the importance of art for understanding Black life, and the meaning of creativity in politically fraught times. Hello, Theodore. How are you today?
Hello, John. Good to be with you.
It's great to have a chance to talk with you today. I really appreciate you making the time for the podcast. My collaborators and I are making a real effort to have more artists and activists on the podcast. And so having your contribution to this series is extremely important and interesting. And I'm just really happy that you made the time. So welcome to the Black Studies Podcast, and I look forward to this conversation.
Beautiful. Glad to be a part of it. Thank you.
So I wanted to start with, I have a chance to talk a little bit about your artistic practice and the way you think about it and approach it. But I wanted to start with really a broader, maybe more personal question, which is just to ask you what drew you as an artist to work on Black life. And by that, I mean, what were those kinds of experiences, whether they're sort of childhood experiences, political experiences, communal experiences, educational experience that brought art and Black life together for you?
Wow, I never asked myself that question. I think it was a gradual opening of consciousness about how Black art in particular, or Black artists throughout the diaspora, or just artists in general throughout the world, record and historicize through visual art in particular, or poetry, or novels, or, through that artists record the lives they're living presently, and also reach back to, in history, to talk about how the past and present relate. That the past, I think James Baldwin said, the past is always in the present. And so I think I got more conscious of this by looking at other visual artists, of course, and reading the poetry of Sonia Sanchez and the Black arts movement and the Harlem Renaissance, to say, I can really, studying these artists and throughout history, putting that into my work, either the personal things, such as my relationship with my father, or just broader social political issues, capitalism, war, all these different heavy issues, put all that stuff into one thing, especially when making a collage, because with images, you can connect the past and the present in a collage that gives you multiple meanings, because a collage is layered. The viewer will get these layered meanings and sift through the images and try to see how these things connect. So the collage is already made, but then the viewer brings their experience to what those images are. And this allegory created by the collage hopefully will open up doors, pathways for the person to think a little deeper about what the artist's form and content is projecting. Did that make sense? And the Black life in particular, studying the work of Bearden and studying, I first got hip to poetry by listening to Sonia Sanchez read. And it was after going to being invited to hear her read. So I'm one of the founders of what is now the Mural Arts Program in Philadelphia, which started out as the Anti-Graffiti Network through the city of Philadelphia. And we were working on a mural, and a friend of mine asked me, did I know who Sonia Sanchez was? And I'm pretty sure I had heard her name, but it wasn't in the forefront of me. And I was not reading a lot of poetry at the time. So I went to this reading at the Philadelphia Free Library, heard Sonia Sanchez read. Right then, the next day, I went to the Black bookstore on 52nd Street in West Philly and got her book, Generations.
Hmm.
And then that's when I started writing poetry. And being a visual artist, this helped me to see Black life differently, I think. Yeah, because the poetry, the images that the words created helped me become a better visual artist, I think.
I can't imagine anything Sonia Sanchez would love more than exactly what you just said, of hearing her read,
Yeah.
immediately going to the
Yeah.
Black-owned bookstore and having it impact the
Yes.
way you do visual art. I mean, I just think like the Black arts movement in general, and of course Sonia Sanchez, the
Yes.
way, poetry is supposed to exceed this idea of the written page or even the performance of the words, right? To have
Yes.
this more
Exactly.
ambient kind of setting and expansiveness. And yeah, and so in becoming an artist do you feel you sort of started to indicate it a little bit there or talk about it a little bit there, you know, did you have sort of concerns about thinking about Black life, however you sort of think about that phrase, that then art became a way to explore it? Or do you think you sort of had an interest in and sort of passion for making and thinking and reading about art that then questions of Black life kind of attached to?
Well, I think as my consciousness became more developed, my life as a young person was very I didn't grow up with my father. My mother raised my sister and I, and we went through a lot of ups and downs. My parents both had drug addictions, but we didn't grow up with my father. My mother kept us together. So, reflecting these things that happened, I'm trying to answer your question as best I can. Um, in my life in particular, seeing the things around me, my community specifically, but zooming out to see the world, and how Black people have to deal with the world and our struggles and our triumphs, and try to make sure there's a balance of these things to reflect in my work. The more I learned, the more I read, my experiences, to hone the form and content in the work and try to make that be a reflection.
Mm.
And what James Baldwin said, is that sometimes you can look into the mirror and it may be disagreeable. So trying to make my work a reflection for people, so when they bring their experience to the work, they may see themselves in it or they may not. So I try to put everything I can into my work and try to deal with the complexities of Black life, um, and see how things have, what are the negative and positive forces that have shaped our lives. So I hope I'm coming close to your
Yeah, of
question.
course. Yeah, no, I mean,
Okay.
especially I think when you talk about this idea of reflection in, Baldwin, of,
Hmm.
that reflection is not always a pleasant one. It's a challenge.
Yes.
It can be, deeply critical in all the ways that we could mean the word critical. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah, no, I mean,
Yeah.
it's exactly what I asked. I mean, I was just sort of interested in sort of, you know, always just a relationship between art and the kinds of things that inform artistic practice, right? Like in this case, the Black Studies podcast,
Yeah.
the Black life. And it's like, the desire to be an
Yes.
artist is one thing, right? An interest in Black life is
Yeah.
another thing. But it's interesting to hear you talk about both of those seeming kind of under processed until they had a connection.
Yeah. And I didn't grow up in a home that was, well, my mother appreciated art. It's not that, but we didn't go to museums and galleries and stuff like that. The most exposure to art was the form of music. My mother loved music. She had, you know, She loved jazz. She loved funk, and Chicago to Art Blakey and the Jazz Messengers. Lee Morgan. So I had all this music in my head, and it started to filter into my art as I grew. I could see the first art form that was a more up. Yeah, thank God for that. And I ended up naming my second daughter after a Lee Morgan tune called Ciora from his album Cornbread. And so, these things, you never know how they're going to affect you later on.
I love that. And thinking about that sort of, sort of expand from that sort of influence of music, but you also talked about Baldwin, made reference to Baldwin. I'm interested to hear a little bit about the relationship between your artistic practice and study. Like, what role does study play in your art, artwork?
My artistic practice and study, when I hear that, I hear research. And my work is being more heavily because of the current series of work that I'm doing now, which is titled "The Centaur Conscientious Objector to Formalism." And the series is like as if you took Martin Luther's 95 Theses, his nailed to the castle church door, and you did that with art concerns, concerned around formalism, uh, aesthetics, and how, say, for instance, I was nailing my 95 Theses onto the MoMA. What I've done is take either the things that I've written, such as Clement Greenberg's Forked Tongue Eats People, and juxtapose that text to the image of the sampling officials of the Amsterdam Drapers Guild, which is the edited painting that's on the Dutch Matcher cigar box. Mm-hmm. Take that image, juxtapose those texts and that red lettering and that red font that they use on the cigar box with the edited version just with the figures. Because the figures are looking at you, dominated by white figures, which, that painting was done in 1616. And when I investigated it, is, about 4, 5, 6 years into the Dutch slave trade. So all my texts, either that I find, such as something by Fred Moten, that the quote of his is, "Black art is a way of documenting bodies." So when it's organically, when I read something that catches me or something that I wrote, I juxtapose that text to that image always. And it's a minimal series, so you just have text and image. And so, because I want to talk back to what formalism has done to Black art, what formalist art criticism has done, and how we have to take that. And, because the whole thing about formalism being, especially the Greenbergian formalism, which is, don't talk about anything political in your art. It's just texture, it's just flatness, and no concerns about the outside world should be in your work. Well, I want to bring that into the work ever more and very heavily, and have the quotes that I use from Fred Moten or Jacqueline Francis, the art historian, or, Mika Ball, Baraka, of course, one of my first collaborators, and put their words juxtaposed to these white figures to talk back to art history.
I love that. That's fantastic. That's super interesting. And thanks for also that description of composition, that it builds study directly into it. And you've already kind of, I think, started to answer this. So let me ask, what do you think that your current work as an artist wants or hopes to say about Black life?
Well, Amiri Baraka's influence is very heavy in my work. He was a collaborator of mine, a mentor, a friend, and his work is becoming more and more important to me. And the legacy of the Black arts movement is because, like, right now, Baraka's two plays, Dutchman and the Slave, opening night is tonight at the Passage Theater in Trenton. And my work is being used in the set design. This series that I just described to you is being used in the set design by Marie Laster, brilliant scene designer, Marie Laster. And it is, I feel like, we work in a tradition. We work in a tradition of our ancestors, what we take from that, what we can use, and we build on what they have made. And we do it, we make it fresh, we make it new. But go back a little bit. I wanted to fill a gap because, they say everything's been said, but you have to say it anew, you know. And now with what's happening to Black studies, what's happening with book bans, what's happening with the literal trying to erase Black history off the face of the planet through this administration is giving us more work to do. Is trying to set back, like Baraka always talked about the Sisyphus syndrome. We roll the rock up the hill and they always push it back down, And so our work has to be ever more political, It has to be, dealing with these crises that we had sort of, some of those things we had, won. And we always had to protect those things, but now we have to fight and get those things back. So our ancestors, current, past and present, we have to take that strength and we got to fight these fights again. And it just puts more stress on Black life. So what I want beneath aesthetics and formalism and deal with that and create work that talks about things, but give it a new form. And that's what art should be if you're an artist, creating new forms. And hopefully the quality of that work is good enough so that it will reflect back to someone. And you want your work to take people on a journey. I want my work to change. I don't want it to be stagnant. I want, to experiment and do different things, and evolve, because I'm going to evolve as a person. So the work should change also. Mm-hmm. So yes, I wanted to make a statement in its form and content that gives people a way in and that you stay with me for a little while. Come on this journey with me. Let's go. Let's do this together. Let's talk. Let's rap and talk about what the subject matter is about in the work, the form and content that, how am I using these materials to create to that my, the ideas are getting through is basically what I'm trying to do.
Thank you. No, that's fantastic. And I think this transitions, I think, in really interesting ways to one of the last two questions I had for you. Because talking about the the urgency of this moment, but it's also an urgency of this moment that has been the urgency of the moment for centuries, right? And Baraka is such a
right.
The Sisyphus reference is such a potent reminder of that. But I'm curious, to hear you talk a little bit about what you think Black art has done well historically, but also what you think maybe it has not done well historically, and thinking about your own art as trying to, as you say, fill in gaps, but also do something well that you think maybe the history of Black art hasn't quite done well or done adequately or addressed in the kind of detail that you are looking for.
That's a great question. One thing, and that's a critical question that is coming up more about Black art, the Black arts movement. It's, how can I say it? The Black art movement's criticism of abstraction, of Black artists that were making abstract work. Like who? Howardina Pendell, for instance, who was rejected from having a show at the Studio Museum because what they would tell them is go downtown with the white boys. And that's a problem, as much as a lot of those people that I love, they should have talked more closely with those artists. And I can understand them wanting I understand that somebody like Emory Douglas, who was doing that great work with the Black Panther newspaper, was blatantly, literally saying, this is the problem, you know. But you got to have a balance. And if people would have talked more closely with Howard Dean Pindell or William T. Williams, Melvin Edwards, who's a little bit different as far as his you knew more where he was coming from, but his work was so powerful. You know, who's Melvin Edwards, the sculptor who did the Lynch Fragment series, who was married to Jane Cortez, the poet, actually. So that's one thing about that's coming up more and more in the study of the Black arts movement and its relationship to abstraction and artists, Black artists doing abstraction. But I think that gap is closing because people are talking about it more.
Uh-huh.
You know, in Baraka's first book of poetry, preface to a 20-volume suicide note, there is abstract work on it. He later did more abstract work. When my wife and I went to go visit Amina Baraka, was it last year, a few months ago or something, there was a Melvin Edwards in there that I had not noticed before. And I was like, great. So that's one subject that's coming up more and more in the scholarship and exhibitions around work that was done in the 60s. The relationship between the Black arts movement's relationship to Black artists doing abstraction. And thank God, a lot of those artists, some of them didn't survive, but now a lot of them are getting their due, such as Howard Dean Pindell, Melvin Edwards, William T. Williams, making strong, beautiful work. And so that's one thing, that first thing that comes to mind when I hear that question.
Great. Thank you. No, that's, this,
Mm-hmm.
it's in some ways, I just think about how, whether it, the whole range of topics in the Black Studies podcast and in Black Studies as a field in its most expansive sense, how much it comes back to this question of what are the consequences of saying yes to or affirming the full humanity of Black people. And it just struck me when you were talking that,
Right.
abstraction might be one of those parts of that might be one way of framing this question of abstraction. I mean, abstraction is a part of humanity. We are abstract creatures, right?
Yes.
And a taste for that, as well as the urgency of the political moment. And so,
Yes.
what there are real consequences to affirming the humanity of any subaltern or, marginalized. And it's really interesting to think about the way those consequences often secrete out and are resisted, but then later can become either centerpieces or such strong forces in an arts movement, a literary movement, or a philosophical movement. And so, anyway, that's just what that made me think, like hearing you talk about that.
Yes.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, yeah.
So let me ask you this last question then. What is the one issue or one question that you'd like to see artists and critics who are concerned with Black life think about and be asking?
Ooh, man.
No one ever has just one. It's usually, can I do two or three? So feel free to. And
Yeah, right. Because it's gonna take two or three. One question I wish they would ask. Well, one thing I wish they would ask. Well, I would like this. One way to have more questions and to answer even this one is to have more publications that deal with this Inca, started by Okwe and Wazor, that is doing a lot of great work. I think we need more publications with critics who know what they're talking about when it deals with the diasporic artists' work. We got a lot more artists exhibiting internationally, globally, but we need more people, more publications that deal with their work critically and to be honest about the work. And we need more publications of artists' writings. Jack Whitten's book is great. Notes from the Woodshed. I would recommend that. There's a book, an edited book that just came out a little while ago. I forget what press is. I think University of California, of artists' writings. But the thing is, too, we can't see is always going to who we already know. There's a lot more visual artists writing that's not being published, that these people that are putting these books out should look at. Hopefully more should be right. Not should. I'm not going to say should. I would like more visual artists to write, to tell their own story, so that when it's time for someone to write about their work, to review their work, at least their voice is there. Now, the critic has the right to not agree, but at least their voice is there. That's why I try to balance my visual art with my writing, too. I enjoy both. They're both connected. They're both important to me. So the writing is essential, too. And it will give you more of an insight as to what the artist is thinking, too. And that's a gap I think that should be filled more. Frank Bowling did a lot of great writing he wrote a lot of reviews, actually. I think it was Art and News back in the day. And now a lot of his writings are being published within his catalogs for his exhibitions. So now we have all that, coming out, which is great. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind because it's a concern to me, which is why whenever I have an exhibition, the work that I've written about, that writing will be there. Other people in the catalog that have contributed to the catalog, my writing will be there. So there's no doubt, there will be no doubt about what I was thinking. Although the writing may be surrealist and phantasmagorical, it'll be there.
Yeah.
So that there will be no mistake about what I was thinking. So yeah, publications, more artist writings coming out, things like that. And it's even more present now because of what's trying to be extinguished. So yeah, that's one of the first things that come to mind.
Thank you. That's a really a fantastic place to end here. I mean, I just think artists writing about their own work, as you say, the critic, reserves the right as critic to have a different kind of intervention and all of that. But at least putting into play this common produce of debate is just an amazing, it's an amazing thing when that writing exists, the nonfiction along with the fiction, for example.
Yeah.
And so, as an academic, I hear a lot of my colleagues say, there's too much, there are too many books or too many articles, too many journals. And I always feel the opposite. I always feel like the more words we have in life, the better. So I'm glad to hear that just personally. So that's my values too. So.
Now, just lastly say, if the critic is good and honest about what they're looking at, the artist can learn something from that critical eye. So, but thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time with this. This has been fantastic. It's going to be a really great contribution. I appreciate your thoughtfulness, and it's just a real gift to the podcast to have, as you described yourself as a writer and artist, that this, doing both of those things and asking the question about what it means to do both of those things. It's a fantastic contribution to the Black Studies podcast. So thank you so much.
It's an honor. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great
Stay in touch.
Day.
Thank you, man. Peace.